My name is Kim. I'm a 40-something single mom who grew up in a non-Christian household, and then over the last year and a half have had really a rescue, I'll call it that, from God Himself, and He has brought me through one of the most difficult storms I've ever faced in life. In some ways, I'm still in the storm, but He is here beside me. I have grown in my faith journey. I have a faith journey now over the last year and a half, and I just love to hear the testimony of what God is doing in other people's lives. I love to share my own testimony if it should ever make a difference. And I really, really enjoy just geeking out over scripture and learning the face of God. I feel like I've got some catching up to do, so I would enjoy anyone's posts or comments or community that this could possibly lead to. I hope you get something out of my Bible geekery, and I would love to get something out of your own Bible geekery, and let's get into it together. Okay, so I was a kid in the 90s, and I was a kid in England, so I don't know if this relates to life in America. It's probably pretty similar, maybe life in small towns, because I was in a small town England. But when I was little, there were like odd occasions where, I don't know, there wasn't childcare. There just wasn't anyone to watch us, and we were little, and so my mom would just bring us to work with her for an afternoon. Not often, but it happened. Bear with me, this story is going somewhere. So she was a pharmacist, and we kind of got to know her little town pharmacy by going in, and typically she'd put us in a safe place. It wasn't like we were playing with pills or disposing medication or sitting in the back somewhere where we could have I don't know, drank a bottle of something accidentally. We were protected. We were in some sort of other environment. We were in the break room, or I can remember being upstairs. It was a cool conveyor belt. I have a cat that's just hanging out, so excuse the cat. Hi, Dinah. This is Dinah. So we're in one such afternoon. My mom brought us all into work, and we're hanging out in our designated little areas, and we're each coloring. And my brother, it was towards the end of her shift, my brother, who was 3 at the time, got kind of bored. And my mom had this rad stool that was round, and it twisted up and down, and you could reach on the top shelves for things. But at a certain setting, it just spun around and around and around if you wanted to sit on it, which as a kid, as a 3-year-old kid, that's amazing. So anyway, bored with coloring books, Stu ends up sitting on this little stool right by the front counter. My mom gives him one rule. She says, okay, there's a little button right under the counter here, and it's the emergency button. Pharmacies unfortunately get robbed often for basically narcotics. Certain classes of narcotics can be used to make drugs other than the drugs that they're medically intended for, so street drugs. And so people, unfortunately, armed robberies are a thing. And so this is the button that she and her staff have to push if there's an armed robbery in the pharmacy. I think there's similar protocols in pharmacies today. Anyway, don't push the button. Don't push the button, Stu. Sit on this little chair, but do not push this button. So of course, he's 3. What happens? Not 5 minutes later, in come the police, armed and ready to roll. And it's my mom and one patient that she's helping. And my brother oh no, the little stool, because he has definitely pushed this button that he's not supposed to push. And turns out, super cute, turns out he pushed the button because in his mind, he told the police he thought that Ecto 2 was going to come, or Ecto 1 was going to come. He was looking for the Ghostbusters, so that's not what the button was for. But my mom hadn't explained what the button was for, not for. She just said, don't push the button. And it turns out this is a super common psychological phenomenon, and it's actually the way that we're wired. And there are a million explanations for this. We've researched the field of psychology now for hundreds of years, and we know some stuff about the way that the human brain works. And so one of them, I'm going to kind of talk about 3 things that related to why my brother pushed this button. The first is called reactance theory. And so reactance theory says basically if you feel your sense of freedom has been threatened or taken away, your human natural response to that is going to be, oh yeah, watch me. Basically. So don't push the button turns into a threat of Stu's freedom, even at age 3. He's like, I'm not allowed to do this. What are you saying right now? Like, of course I'm allowed to do this. Now I just want to do it more because you've said I can't do it. My freedom to push this button has been removed. Now I want to push the button. Hold on to that one. That's actually called, the nickname for it is the forbidden fruit effect. And that's not from anyone biblically. That's from a psychological perspective. This is the reactance theory has been around since 1966, where Mr. Jack W. Graham proposed this in a bunch of experiments. You can read up on it online, I guess. Just look up reactance theory. Super fascinating. That's kind of like the beginning of this like one particular psychological thread. So just like check that in your brain. Someone tells you you can't do something, your freedom is threatened, you want to do it. And we don't have to be psychology experts, right? Like we know that that's true. We all saw where it was going. As soon as I said, like, he sat there and he's told not to push the button, everybody watching is like, he pushed the button. Of course he pushed the button. He's going to push the button. My mom probably was like, he's going to push that button, at the time. I know, Dinah, what am I talking about? I'm talking a lot, aren't I? The next theory is called ironic process theory. And this is nicknamed, and you might have heard of this one. I feel like I had in some distant, like, oh yeah, like in school, I feel like we talked about this. It's called the white bear problem. And this is a discovery from Daniel Wegner in 1987. And basically, he sat different groups of people in rooms and told them not to think about a white bear. And what happened? The people who were told, the non-control group that were told not to think about the white bear were supposed to ring a bell every time they thought about the white bear. And because they were told not to do it, they just couldn't get the white bear out of their mind, right? I'm saying it right now, you guys are all picturing a white bear. I guarantee everybody watching has pictured a white bear at least once, just because we're talking about it. And so that theory, the ironic process theory, the white bear problem, basically comes from this guy, Wegner's fascination, I'll say, on like, what can we control as humans? Like, can we control our subconscious? Can we control our conscience? To what degree can we control those things? And so his theory essentially was one set of what then turned into many, many, many different experiments to sort of prove what we can control and what we can't. And basically, when our brain is trying hard not to think of something, don't picture this, don't think of this, like you have to do it, because the way our brain processes information is it first has to comb our thoughts to eliminate the thing that we're trying not to think about. And so we put it there as a comparison, we have to think about it. Anyway, also fascinating. That's called ironic process theory. So think of those two things. So if we're told, so in the case of my brother, right, we're told not to push the button. So our freedom has been threatened. My freedom to push this button no longer exists. And we're told not to like worry about the button that's right there. So our brain is obsessing about the button because we're just like, I can't stop thinking about this button now. Because in a way, he was told like sort of not to think about it, right? And then this third theory, this third kind of piece of the puzzle, the psychological puzzle, it's called information gap theory. And this is from 1994 from a guy called George Lowenstein. You can look into all of these, and there's like just like expanding. I'm obviously giving like a really surface level bullet point for each of these because ow, did you bite my arm, Dinah? Ow, how could you? Okay, snuggle down, that's fine. All right, sorry, very distracting. So the information gap theory from Mr. Lowenstein back in 1994 basically states that when we feel like we're just on the edge of discovery, or we like almost know something, or we just can't quite get there, but we're so close, when we feel like the gap between what we want to know and what we do know is very close, it like increases our curiosity. And our curiosity is like magnets, like the closer they get, like the curiosity grows, right? So picture is all three of those. So it's what, and that one's going to come in just a minute. So like the threatening of freedom, don't push the button, right? The white bear problem, don't think about the white bear, or don't think about the button. And then we've got this like gap in knowledge. And so the way that Lowenstein, she is so cuddly right now, you guys, she's so cute. The way that Lowenstein kind of discovered how and why people's brains sort of work this way is he used trivia questions. So when people that felt like it was like information that they had no idea, and they were like, dude, I don't know that. I literally can't, even if you paid me, like, think of that information. I don't think I've ever learned that. They didn't care. They didn't care to think about the answer. They were like, oh yeah, no, that's just not within my information. But if it was something that they were like, oh, I feel like I do know that one. What's the capital of Australia? And they're like, oh, you know what? I do know this. Is it Brisbane? Is it, and they're like going through and they're like, no, it's not that one. And they're right on the edge, right? That's when their like curiosity was piqued and they were more intense about it. So anyway, it's a whole thing. But all of these, I think, in relation to Eve and the fruit, here's where I'm going with this. So forbidden fruit effect. I'm thinking about the fall. I've been thinking a lot in general about how we, like, what is biblical discernment? How do we pull good from evil? And obviously, like, the Bible has a ton to say about this, not just the fall, but for the case of today, like, that's what I've been sort of really trying to sort of think through. Why did Satan choose to go to Eve and not Adam? Why did his tactic work so well? How can we recognize that tactic out in the real world? And what does it say? What does this one story of like the fruit itself say about Satan, and conversely, and more importantly, what does it say about God? And I became fascinated with, and I always do, like the scientific truths behind every single Bible story of like, wow, God really knew how we are wired, knows how we are wired, and approached this with such kindness that blows my mind sometimes. And I think we underappreciate or undervalue how loved we are, even in just the very simple things. So God, obviously, he created the way our minds work. He knows these psychological theories better than better than Bram and Wegner and Lowenstein. He is the author of these theories. He's the author of our brain, right? So he not only understands these, but 7,000 beyond this and to infinity, right? And when I look at that framework and I look at why we do the things that we do, why God knows we're going to do those things and tries to approach us with such love, and I look at the way that he asked, he gave us direction, or he gave us advice. He advised us, I'll say. It's not even direction that he gave. Listen to what he actually said to Adam in the garden. He said, you are free to eat from any tree in the garden, but you must not eat from the tree of knowledge of good and evil, for when you eat from it, you will certainly die. So I love this so much. And I think of that first theory, right? Like, when we feel like our freedom is threatened, we want to do the thing. And so God's like, I don't even want you to struggle with this. I don't even want you to struggle with an idea or with a thought or with a temptation that is going to hurt you. And so the first words he says, the lead into this sentence, like every word is so precise and so planned and so love-filled, it's nuts. You are free, he says. I'm not taking away your freedom. He gets right out in front of that theory. He says, you are free to eat from any tree in the garden, but you must not eat from the tree of knowledge of good and evil, for when you eat from it, not if, when. Lots to think about there, right? When you eat from it, you will certainly die. So he's really precise. He doesn't leave us in ambiguity. He doesn't threaten our freedom. He doesn't create an information gap to say, I almost know why I shouldn't eat this fruit. He says, you'll die. I'll tell you why. And he does it simply, kindly. It works. Adam doesn't struggle. It doesn't say Adam like went away and he was like, man, I really Now I want to eat that. He wasn't struggling with it. No one was struggling with it. When the serpent found Eve, she wasn't struggling with this decision. She was fine. Everyone was fine. So that, and you'll all know this, or many of you'll know this, because I feel like it's such a, I'm learning that as a very new Christian who did not grow up in a Christian household, these are the stories and the words that like excite me or pique my curiosity, or I'll spend a very long time on. And I'm learning that the rest of the Christian world doesn't, because you all know these stories so well. I don't, I'm new. So it gives me, I guess, like in some ways, like a really fresh perspective. I get to have very new eyes on these things. But for the sake of probably most people, this is not new. This is not like a super new story. And you probably have the words of God and the word of the serpent memorized. And maybe you've even thought of this before, I don't know. But for me, I like to like really go deep as I can, and just think through like every single word of why was it that precise pattern of words or choice of words, or why was it at this exact time? And so to me, I think to look then at like the succession of like how things went. So God gives that warning, and then it ends with like, and you know, everything's good in the garden, and he ends by saying, and Adam and Eve were naked, and they felt no shame. Now, why point that out? Why point that out? That's like just an interesting thing to point out. There's just so much happening in this story. He warns Adam about the fruit. He does so in this really loving way, so as not to like pique this endless curiosity or get Adam sitting in a spinning chair right in front of a button. Adam's okay. He's not worried. Uh-oh. It's still recording. Sorry, like I got a call in the middle of that. I think it might have to cut me off. Anyway, I will have to edit this. Because now where was I? So Adam's not worried. Okay, and so the two other things that are happening in this story that I think interested me is that that God takes effort to specify that Adam and Eve are naked, but did not feel shame. Positive, and why say that? And it's the first not good. The first time that God says anything in the Bible is not good. And he says that that Adam's alone, and he's named all the animals, and there's not a suitable helper, and it's not good for Adam to be alone. He said Adam's alone, and God knew it was not good. So two things that God has pointed out here in this very, very beginning that man was not wired for, that is not good for us, that we should avoid, that is harmful to us. The first is shame. Shame isn't a load we were meant to carry. It's not anything that we were supposed to experience. We did not have shame before the fall, and I think that says oh so much. And the second is that we aren't meant to be alone. And so by contrast, if we just say evil is the absence of God or anything that goes against God, we can guess, and we'll very quickly find out, that those two trigger points are two of, if not, I would argue, the lead ways that that the devil attacks us. One is by shame or fear of shame. And the second is by isolation, making us lonely, making us long for companionship that might not make sense. And so just a lot introduced, I think, right up front on the way that God functions. Now let's look at what the serpent did. So he doesn't approach Adam, right? Because Adam has firsthand heard the information from God. So when Adam pulls from his memory bank, he's going to hear God's voice saying to him, you are free to eat any fruit. He's going to hear the opening line of like, you are free. He's going to remember how it made him feel. There's a really famous Maya Angelou quote that's like, you won't remember what people said or did, but you're going to remember the way that they made you feel. I'm paraphrasing that. I'll find the actual quote, but just a beautiful quote about sort of customer service and hospitality and how to really make people feel loved. That people are going to remember the way that you made them feel. And so the devil knows that. He's nowhere in the Bible does it say that he's not smart. He is. He knows that Adam has this memory bank of God lovingly telling him about the fruit and the trees in the garden. Eve wasn't there, so she's getting it secondhand. She was created after this conversation, right? So once she's formed and she's created, she's hearing this secondhand from Adam. Now, I have no doubt that Adam approached the conversation lovingly as well, but he's not God. He's Adam. And so now Eve has a doubt that she can fall back on. So when what Adam said to her, what Adam passed along is questioned, she's more likely to go, did I mishear Adam? Did Adam mishear God? That's different from my interpretation. What's going on here? And you want to defend. So let's listen to what the serpent says. So he goes in very differently, and he goes in leading Eve. Watch this really closely. He's leading Eve into a different framing of how God approached this whole fruit in the garden with the trees thing. And he says, did God really say you must not eat from any tree in the garden? So there's a guy called Chris Voss. He was I know I'm skipping around a little bit, but bear with me again. This ties in. This guy called Chris Voss, and he is a ex-FBI hostage negotiator. He used to negotiate with terrorists, and he was a highly successful negotiator. And he runs a society called the Black Swan Society, I think. That's like a bunch of different teachings for negotiations, and he has a book that is so good. Oh man. But the part of the framework of his negotiation tactics, I will find that book name. Part of the framework of his negotiation tactics, anyway, is you don't get to yes. That was like an old school tactic. Like, do you breathe air? Do you like the earth? Do you enjoy being alive? Then you're gonna love this, because you're using like yes, 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 and then you get in the habit of saying yes. That was like the old tactic. And he says, actually, psychologically, it makes a lot more sense if you can get to a no, because then the person feels like they have their own agency. They feel like they have their own authority. And listen to how this goes exactly with reactance theory. When we feel like our freedom has been threatened, we want to rebel. It triggers something in here, and it does for all of us. When someone tells us we can't do something, we want to prove them wrong, we want to do it. Oh yeah? It's a gut reaction. And so when someone can get us to a no, then we feel like very safe. And this is where Chris Voss is going with this. We feel very safe in the negotiation because it's okay. I already started out saying no. My first thing I said was no. Then I'm in the habit of feeling like I've got total control of this conversation because I'm not just being led yes, 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 and being told what to say. I'm coming up with the answers. I'm on my own no. And so he will ask questions, or he recommends asking questions to get to a no very quickly. And then once you've gotten to the first no, then the negotiation can open. And it's really smart. It's a cool book. Anyway, this is exactly what the devil does. He asks a question, and he proves like a couple lines later that he knows exactly what God said to Adam. He knows exactly what God said to Adam because he says later, you will not certainly die. It's almost the same words that God said. God said, you will certainly die. Here comes Satan, you will not certainly die. It's almost the same words, almost, with a little serpent squiddly twist, the little twistiness to it. And so he comes to Eve and he says, did God really say that you can't eat any of these fruits in this garden? Knowing full well that that's not what God said at all, but that's going to get him to the no. That's going to get her to feel like she has freedom, she has agency, she's in control of this conversation. And watch how he's led that. He's led it with, did God really say these ridiculous things that he didn't say? And so automatically she's in a place where she wants to defend truth, but she also wants to clarify what is forbidden. He's put in there that did he say you can't do something? And so she's like, oh, no, it's just this one thing that you can't do. So whatever her phrasing is going to be, whatever she says next, she's been primed to say a no, feel her sense of agency grow, and to then come back with what is forbidden, and then start to question it. Because now something different is happening. There's a different conversation that's happening. So it doesn't really matter what she says next. He's set her up. Right? It's called a double bind, when there's no right answer. Whatever she says is going to just hurt her. The way the question was asked was very carefully crafted to get exactly there. I'm going to have to cut this off and come back in a sec. Okay, sorry about that. Took like a little break, so this might feel a little just disjointed, but I am going to try and edit this together so that it makes a little bit more sense. So one thing, like, don't mistake my meaning on this. I'm not trying to say that we are off the hook, that we humans didn't make a massive mistake at the fall. We did. We are not an innocent party here, but what I am trying to explore or uncover here is what specifically does this story tell us about God and God's nature, and what specifically does this story tell us about the nature of the devil, and what should we watch for? How does he operate? If we don't know our enemy, if we don't know what we're looking for, we're going to just fall again and again and again, right? There's like a reason we learn certain historical events in school. They're tough. They're hard to swallow. They're difficult to sit in. The fall is difficult to sit in. It should be. It should be difficult to sit in because what occurs to me every time I think I'd heard the story like abstractly, and when I read the story in detail and read it again and again and again, I thought what struck me was that could be me yesterday, today, tomorrow. That could be me any day. I would totally fall for that. I have totally fallen for that again and again and again. My brother at age 3, sitting in the spinning chair, wasn't a bad kid, but he was told don't push the button by someone who loves him, and he pushed the button. It doesn't, like, I'm not trying to make commentary on like the nature of man in this case, or the nature of man and woman, mankind in this case. What I'm trying to do is understand what can we learn about the nature of God, the nature of Satan, and how do we move forward. And I think one of the like bigger things that really hit me in this story as well, skipping around a little bit, is the use of the word shame. So my son and I, again, new Christian here. My son and I were in the car one day, and we passed a car, or a car passed us, and I can't even remember, and like it's gonna seem so obvious to anyone who's like been to seminary or even been a Christian for like any period of time, or has made any like deep studies into apologetics. It's a verse in James, I want to say, or Peter. It'll come to me at a random time. That's how these things are. See what's happening to my brain right now? I'm in the information gap. There's something on the tip of my tongue, and so now I really want it. There's a Bible verse on the tip of my tongue, and it's in James or Peter, and it's about curiosity and defending God's nature. And it's like the apologetics tagline. And this car passed us anyway, and it had the verse on it, and we were like, ooh, how interesting. Watch it be like Matthew, and I'm like, oh, I was way off. It's fine. It doesn't really matter. The point is, it had a Bible verse on the back, and in traffic, we are like looking it up in our Bible on our phone. And then later I was like, well, and then it said something apologetic society, and I was like, well, that's super interesting. Like, what are apologetics? And it was early days, and I ended up coming home and researching it, and I love C.S. Lewis, and I was like, C.S. Lewis was apologetics. Get it? Apologetics is actually like what I do naturally. My heart resonates with this. God was like, look, you should look into this thing. So that was his way of doing that for me on that particular afternoon. Or maybe it wasn't for me at all. Maybe it was for Jude. Maybe it was for my son. It was his way of like showing us something to think about. Where am I going with this? wow, my brain just totally like lost track of what it was doing. This happens sometimes. Anyway, it's like defending the nature of God, or defending the Bible using science and using like things like that. Anyway, one of the key principles to apologetics, and one of the things that C.S. Lewis used to say, and it like struck me, and I was like, dude, that's so true, is that like all sin derives from one sin, and that one sin is pride. We fall because we are proud. We screw up because we are proud. And I was like, well, that's interesting. So I got kind of caught up, and I was like, because that feels like a truth to me. And I was like, that feels right. And I can't think of a sin that doesn't in some way relate pretty directly back to pride. But then that's not what God says. God says shame. He like very specifically calls it out and says, you know, they were wearing no clothes and they felt no shame. Now, clothing in the Bible, I didn't know this, the Hebrew word for righteousness is to be clothed. So total double meaning here when we talk about clothing in the Bible, it's righteousness. It's being right in right relationship with God. That's what righteousness is. And so when we're talking about clothing, we're not just talking about clothing. Nothing is exactly what it seems in the Bible, obviously, right? So this is like layers of meaning on meaning. But when we talk about the beginning, Genesis 2, what God outlines that we didn't have and now do is shame, not pride, shame. And when I think of it in that context, I think, well, God used the word shame, not pride. What is pride but the fear of shame, right? So God also says, like, have no fear, don't be afraid, don't fear. He basically tells us not to have fear 366 times in the Bible, like one for every day of the year and a bonus one. So if I put all of those facts together, like it's a pretty clear outline of this introduction of shame, that the serpent, like that was the whole plan going in, right? Let's get shame in the game, because if I get shame in the game, man will do anything for the fear of shame. That's our pride. Our pride is hurt because we don't, we want to avoid shame. Those of us who want to avoid shame more strongly than others might manifest in more pride or more greed or more, name the sin, but they all have a root in shame. If we did not feel shame, if we had no shame, if we were the way that God actually created us, which is free of shame, the way we get to live in the eternal kingdom of heaven, there is no shame. And you think about that on all the layers. The first thing that we do when we feel shame is we go and put clothes on. And then God gives us clothes. And God invites us to a wedding later and says, hey, you're a guest at this wedding and I'm sending you an outfit to wear. Like, read the through line of clothing in the Bible, and it just opens up a whole new layer of meaning that I think blows my mind on just how much he loves us. I like everything relates back to that. Like, it's these really root principles that but there's a difference between knowing something and then like rediscovering it or finding it in different passages. Isaiah said that you read the Bible like that, a little here, a little there, and that's so right. Like, you pick these pieces up, a little here, a little there, and then you put them together, and the picture of love is so intense. I can only hope to ever feel love that way, and I'm blown away that I am loved like that, and that everyone I love is loved like that. So I think I love my kids pretty strongly, and I think there can be nothing bigger, and yet it is. So I think, to me, like, this parallel of Satan using any tactic possible to elevate himself, and to bring us down, and to take us out. And if you understand that the tactic is shame, and anything that feels like shame comes from him, that changes the perspective pretty quickly and makes it pretty easy to identify when something comes from the adversary and when something comes from God. No shame, God. Light, truth, openness, God. Darkness, shame, hiding from God, hiding from God's face, right? What Adam and Eve did as soon as they were as soon as they had eaten the fruit, like they hid. Anyway, I feel like I'm not probably, I am not articulating it as well, of course, as the word is, but I would just encourage you, like with that lens, to just go back through. It's not that long, like Genesis 2 and 3 today, and just like reread them. And I would love comments on what you thought or what you picked up on, because I'm scratching a surface here, but like obviously this is an iceberg. It's layers deep. There's so much, and there's so much else that's in these 2 chapters that I haven't mentioned, that I would love to hear like more about, or would love to learn more about. Like geek out with me, would love it. Last geek thing, and then I'll stop talking for the day. I was interested to find out that the name for serpent in Hebrew, I do love like the Hebrew words for things. Sorry. The Hebrew word for serpent is an onomatopoeia. And so an onomatopoeia is something that sounds like the word, like hiss is a good example and as a related example. So check out, I'm gonna like butcher this a little bit, but I bet it would sound so cool for someone who can like really speak Hebrew well. The Hebrew for serpent is nashash. Nashash. Like you can't do it without a growly face and a hissing sound, and it sounds like serpent. It is totally onomatopoeic, which is really, really cool. But it actually, as everything else in the Hebrew language does, it has multiple meanings. So it does mean serpent, or like a hissing sound. It also means to practice divination. So that's super interesting. The word for certain is divination. So using dark witchcraft, basically, to get your own way instead of God's way. So him. And then there's like a school of thought that, and this can't be like, there's scholarly debate, I should say, on like if this root is in there or not, but there could be something that relates to like bronze or shining, which obviously also relates to the angel of light, as he's called in some parts of the Bible, right? Like he was a fallen angel. He was a light cherubim at one point, and now is not, but he was beautiful and shiny. And so this like image of shiny, this shiny, coiling, twisted serpent, like if you really think about that throughout the Bible too, I feel like that helps us also identify the tactics, using God's word, like I said before, with you will certainly die, and he uses almost the exact same words. It feels close-ish, but it isn't. It's darker and it's twisted. This twisted serpent idea is just so like, yep, that's it. And if you've ever known a person who's like this, or be hurt by somebody who's under the influence of darkness, whether they like knowingly or willingly hurt you or did this or not, that's what it feels like. It feels like a twist on words that is dark. It's when someone says something in sarcasm to hurt you, or someone asks a question to lead you into a particular defense track. It's when someone makes you feel shame. You walk away from a conversation feeling shame. That was not of God. Just full stop and period. It was not. So anyway, things to think about. So since I didn't introduce myself in the end, I'll do so in the beginning, I'll do so in the end. My name is Kim. I am, as I say, a fairly new Christian, and I am addicted to his word. I would love to geek out with you or anyone online, as best as possible. So if you leave comments, if you want to tag any videos that you've made on just general Bible geekery, I would love to nerd out with you on the word. So I'll be posting, I guess, similar ramblings of just things that I'm thinking about and working through in the Bible. Would love to hear from anyone and everyone else doing the same. I know I'm not alone on this journey. So although I don't have a super large live Christian community today, I'm hoping to sort of build an online one. So this is part of my hodos, part of my walk, part of my way. Thanks for watching and sticking with me through a long ramble. Looking forward to seeing what everyone else has to say. Hello, my name is Kim, and I am a practicing Christian for a year and a half, 2 years at this point. I have identified as a Christian my whole life based on church attendance and not a whole lot else. But everything has changed me in the last couple of years for me and my family, and I am just a pretty massive Bible nerd at this point. So join me on my very new and very exciting, for me, Bible journey for anyone else who wants to just geek out on the Word and just think through the implications of the things within the Bible. So since I didn't introduce myself in the end, I'll do so in the beginning, I'll do so in the end. My name is Kim. I am, as I say, a fairly new Christian, and I am addicted to His Word. I would love to geek out with you or anyone online as best as possible. So if you leave comments, if you want to tag any videos that you've made on just general Bible geekery, I would love to nerd out with you on the Word. So I'll be posting, I guess, similar ramblings of just things that I'm thinking about and working through in the Bible. Would love to hear from anyone and everyone else doing the same. I know I'm not alone on this journey. So although I don't have a super large live Christian community today, I'm hoping to sort of build an online one. So this is part of my hodos, part of my walk, part of my way. Thanks for watching and sticking with me through a long ramble. Looking forward to seeing what everyone else has to say.